All the tithe is the Lord's. It is holy to the Lord. If you would catch this, it would just transform your life. For you could step up by faith and become a partner with God. And you would begin to see God work in your life in such a special way. All the tithe is the Lord's. That's an eternal principle. God taught it to his people before the law was given. And it carries on after the law. In the day of grace that you and I live in, the tithe is the Lord, still is. It's an eternal principle. It is holy to the Lord. The tithe is the Lord's. Number 4, Jesus came not to destroy or to annul the law, but to fulfill it and place it on a higher plane. Some people say, oh, Pastor Carl, that tithing business, that's the Old Testament law. We're not under the Old Testament law. We're in the age of grace. Well, I just want you to know that on this side of the cross, Jesus took us to a higher plane. Time and again, we find Jesus saying, it is written, but I say to you, it is written, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you to look upon a woman. It is written, you shall not murder. But I say to you to be angry with your... You see, Jesus took it to a higher level. He never did away with the law. He superseded the law. And so, the tithe is the Lord's. And if somebody wants to argue and say, well, we're not under that, we're under grace, well, then that's true. We should always do more than that. The tithe's a good starting place. But it's not a good place to stop. It's a good place to start. Number 5, Paul taught that the gospel ministry should be supported just as the Old Testament ministers were. And for the sake of time, we won't turn to that one and look at that, but you can look at it. Number 6, Christians are under greater obligation. We are. You see, if God expected the Old Testament believers to tithe, what about us in this day when we live on this side of the cross? We live with a complete Bible. We have a full revelation. I mean, those people were saved looking forward to the cross, but they had not near the concept of God's grace that you and I have. Now we know what Jesus did for us on the cross, and we have seen, his marvelous plan laid out, and we have a complete Bible. To whom much is given, much is required. And so if God expected that of those people, he certainly expects it of you and of me. Number 7, God calls us to be first, put him first, that is. We are to be regular, systematic, and proportionate givers. We see it in 1 Corinthians 16. Look at this one I think it's just on the screen. Now concerning the collection for the saints, Paul writes, as I directed the church of Galatia, so do you also. And here's what they're to do. On the first day of the week. Where do you go on the first day of the week? Where you're at right now. You go to the Lord's house. The first day of the week. The church, the New Testament church, began to worship on the first day of the week because that's when Jesus met with them in honor of his resurrection. And so on the first day of the week, Jesus came forth from the tomb, and we worship him. All through the New Testament, it talks about the first day of the week. And so on the first day of the week, each one of you, notice those words, each one. One translation says every one of you. Well, Pastor Carl, you don't mean the poor should have to give too, do you? Yes, the poor should have the wonderful privilege of giving as well as the wealthy. Don't you remember Jesus saw a little widow lady who gave her last 2 pennies in an offering? And Jesus didn't come up and say, oh, here, you take those 2 pennies. You're too poor to give. Not at all. Jesus commended her. Why? Because when you give, you become a partner with God. You begin to work. You begin to jumpstart God's economy, and God begins to work in a marvelous and an amazing way. One day, Jesus was teaching to thousands of people, and he said to his disciples, "We need to feed these people lunch." And they said, "We don't have any lunch. It would take 200 denarii to feed these people." And about that time, Andrew came up and said, "There's a little boy here, got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He got a little lunch." Jesus said, "Well, keep his lunch. We're not going to take that kid's lunch." Is that what Jesus said? No. He took the little boy's lunch and he fed a multitude with it. Listen, God will take what little gift you and I have, he will multiply it and bless it, and he will turn and bless you and me because we become partners with him by faith. So on the first day of every week, let each one of you, each one, to put aside and save as he may prosper, so that no collections may be made when I come. Do it every week. Put it in every week as he prospers. You see, God prospers people differently. And that's proportionate giving that God is referring to there. And so one man prospers $1,000 a week and his tithe is $100. Another man prospers $500 a week and his tithe is $50. And so that's what God is talking about there. That's proportionate giving. He's talking about proportionate giving, and it's the only proportion that God is given in the Bible. And so he is giving that instruction to them there. Now, let's go on in our outline. Why does God want me to give? Why does God want me to give? Well, first of all, we don't give to enrich God. Not in the least. Look what God says. If I were hungry, would I tell you? For the world is mine and all it contains. Isn't that an awesome thought? Everything in this world is God's. Man, I was down at the ocean a few days ago, or a week or so ago. You know what? I saw some dolphins jumping in the water. Man, I just was so impressed, so excited to see those dolphins jumping in the water. And I thought, you know what? God probably knows their names. He has every one of them named. I don't know that for sure, but I just kind of think he does. Because the Bible says in the Psalms, it says he knows he knows he has all the stars numbered, and he knows every star's name. Wow. Can you imagine that? And so, what a great, great God. He is awesome. Last night I couldn't sleep. This is very unusual for me. Usually I go to bed early and get up very early, but I went to bed. I just couldn't sleep last night. So I got back up, went downstairs, sat in the recliner in the living room with my little light on above me and my dog next to me, and, just read a while, thought about this a while. And then I got up and I walked into the TV room, and it was dark. The light wasn't on in there. And I walked over to the glass doors looking out in the back, and oh my lands, my dog started growling. He was next to me, and he saw it too. There were 13 deer in the backyard eating on my trees. Do you know why they were there? Because just before I left to go on this trip, it was so cold, and we had that much snow, and I got worried about the deer. I said, I don't know if they can find something to eat. So I'm going to help God out and help feed them, So I went over to TSC and I bought a bag of deer food and put it in a bucket out back. And the word's out now. And so I got every deer in the county coming to my backyard. And in fact, this morning I got up and I let the dog out on the front porch. And I heard a little deep growl. And I looked out the window. Pretty soon he shot off the porch and went over and he chased 3 deer right out in front. Man, they're all over. And but God says, if I was hungry, I wouldn't tell you. The world is mine, all it contains. It's all God's.